Today we're covering the Honor Magic8 Pro Air 4 months later, and is it worth the buy? Disclaimer, no sponsorships are involved in this video, don't believe me. Here's a receipt I have on hand. As you can see, email showing purchased from Swappa, got this in April. Now, only showing that because some reviewers may say no sponsorships, but why they show no receipt, don't know. I like to go the extra mile because my opinions are real and honest. So if you like that, like, comment, subscribe, much appreciated. On to the review. So the way I like to do reviews, I go across a list of categories which I think are the most important ones to consider. Those being updates, the chipset, the battery capacity and the usage, long-term reliability, long-term durability, features, and the camera. So I will be giving a chart here throughout the video, and in my other videos, I do like to rank these. However, this one's going to be a little bit more of a holistic overall should you buy, because I haven't really used the other brands that would compete in the category of this type of device. So first things first, let's look at the release date. So the Honor released January 19th, 2026. And when we look at the other phones that would maybe kind of challenge this device, we're looking at the Pixel, which released last year in 2025, the 10 Pro. Then we have the Samsung S25 Edge, also released last year. And then lastly, the Apple iPhone Air, also released last year. So the Honor is the new kid on the block. Now, updates. When we look at the updates, all these phones are 7 years OS and 7-year security updates. iPhone typically does the 5 to 7. They don't disclose, but we give them 7 years there. So this is pretty good range here that the Honor is covering. And again, because it is the new one, it is getting you up to date to that 2033, while the other ones are only, meeting you at 2032. Now, next though, this is where the conversation starts to get interesting because we're talking screen size and weight. And the reason why anyone would maybe go for something like this is because you care about one-hand use. You don't want one of those big boy phones that are like 6.5 inches and above. And so when we look at the screen size, the Honor is coming at 6.31 and 155 grams. And interestingly enough though, the Pixel is a little bit shorter by 0.01 inches and still is giving you some extra grams there with at least 50, and coming at like 207 grams, quick math. But when we look at the Samsung, this is now like a big boy, and it's going to be looking at 6.7, and it's slightly a little bit more heavier than the Honor. And then lastly, that Apple iPhone Air is much, taller in screen size than the Honor, and also the a little bit heavier than the Honor. So out of the bunch, the Honor is the lightest, and it also is somewhat fairly small, not like the Pixel, but it's getting there. So if you care about that, that convenience of a small phone, this is quite the appeal. However, there are other things to consider, and that's why we're here, right? So let's look at the chipset, right? The chipset on the Honor is the MediaTek 9500, similar to what you could find on the Oppo Find X9 Pro, which is honestly a really good chip. And then when we look at the other ones in its competition, the MediaTek is actually pretty good. It's going to outpace the Tensor, which you have in the 10 Pro for the Pixel. As far as the 8 Elite, now it's going to be, I would say it's equal. Some people will say it's neck and neck, or maybe not. The 8 Elite tends to be the more better performer, with the MediaTek often being the more battery conservative. And then lastly, we have the Apple. And I will say though, it's quite interesting that the Apple was able to fit their latest chip on the Air, which you find on the 17 Pro and the 17 Pro Max. And that is going to be kind of a really good chip compared to the MediaTek. So, and I love Android, but Apple chips are pretty good. Now, next, let's talk about the battery capacity and the usage. As far as usage for me, this phone, I felt like it got me through the day. It was like equivalent to what I would say S25 Plus, 1 day usage. Typical. Much better than I would say the Pixel, but this is where it's quite interesting, as we saw compared to these other small phones. This one was not the smallest; it was second smallest, 6.331 inches, right? However, the type of battery that they fit in this is impressive. It's the biggest one, which makes sense why, the experience and the daily usage would probably be better. It's 5,500 milliamps, and compared to the other ones, I mean, the Pixel is just almost close to that 5,000, but doesn't quite make it. But when we look at the Edge on the 25, it's not even 4,000 milliamps, and then the Apple is pitiful because it's at 3,149. So if you had a choice, I mean, obviously battery is going to be pretty good because of, the big size battery here. However, there is also some OS to account for that in the Honor and why the battery experience might be better. And we'll talk about that closer to the end. And so long-term reliability now, though. When I talk about the reliability, can this phone, last you those 7 years? Is it going to be a phone you can trust? And if I had to rank this one 1 to 5, or, in that kind of scale, it's going to be 1. It's very poor. I mean, this phone, I think its biggest issue, as good as it is with that battery, is its Chinese variant. So I'm in the United States, and a lot of these Chinese models, people will say you can save money, you can configure the settings, and then it'll have the same experience. Not quite the case. I've tested the Oppo phones, the Vivo phones, and the Chinese, and there's some configurations you can do with the phones. But the biggest thing is, even after that, you have a delay notification. So if you really are waiting on texts from family members, emergencies, that sort of thing, work stuff, I just don't feel like this is a really good phone to rely on. So that's why it's a 1. It will get emergency alerts from like the state level, so like those amber alerts and natural disasters, so you don't have to worry about that. It's just the text coming from the messaging app, so really low on this one. Then that long-term durability also low. I would say it's really, really poor. You're importing this phone from another country, and being that the case, if you're trying to repair this, warranty, you're not going to find it an easy one. It's not like a Samsung or Google where you can go to Best Buy or second stores, you break, fix it, you need to fix the panel or whatever. That's probably not going to be the case here. So it's really low, really high stakes on this one, guys. And so let's talk about the features. As far as the features go, it is really jam-packed, I would say. However, it sucks because you're not going to be able to use a lot of the features. So what I mean is, because it's Chinese, a lot of the Honor AI is tied to this Yo-Yo agent. And so some of it you can use, others you cannot. So like things like the Yo-Yo agent that is like, translate things, it may not work seamless all the time. So you're like on call, you can use it on call, and you can translate it so that, it translates back to you in English and then other languages, but the languages are very limited. The agent's always going to speak in Chinese too. So if you don't know that, then, SOL, look that up. You could do a this is pretty cool. You could change the AI button here on the side to something else of your choice. And it's funny because if you've seen this animation, maybe it's familiar to somewhere else. They're really, they're using their play on, other competitors, but no shame there on their part. AI writing, your typical stuff there, like you see on other phones, if you want to like enhance your writing, which I don't care about that. You could do memos here, support real-time transcription, but it's really it's really a miss here because again, a lot of this stuff is going to be in Chinese. So the sidebar here is something you would see back in the Samsung S7 Edge days. Don't really care to use that. I do like the Magic Portal. This is something where you can kind of take some of your context, like your text and other things, images, and then kind of open it and then seamlessly use it across other apps. So pretty good there. So it seems like you get a lot. The phone is dual SIM, and again, but some of this stuff isn't going to work. So yeah, but the dual SIM is going to work, so that's fine. If you're going to want to use this phone, it's going to be GSM network, so AT&T, T-Mobile is probably going to be your best experience. Honor Connect, you could try this, but not really if you're in the United States, because you need an account. If you're looking here at the registration, going down to the categories, you don't see the United States. So you're not going to be using Honor Connect. So again, not going to be using all this stuff, you know, if you're trying to connect to your phone and stuff. More connections. So here, the one tap, I think this is kind of interesting. But again, United States, we're going to find within Honor phone to seamlessly transfer in that kind of a fashion where you tap. You could also do it with the iPhone, but this one's silly because you're going to have to need them to download an app. So not really convenient on their end. They're not going to want to do that. Wireless projection. This one is somewhat neat. You could, on like a smart TV, do a desktop mode experience. It's their version of a desktop. It's called Magic Desktop. I'm disappointed that they didn't do wired desktop, because the wireless can be a bit laggy, but at least you have that there. So no wired desktop mode, and honestly, it's not as good as what you get on the Samsung DeX. What else? Let's go scrolling down. This is where it gets a little more unique. Honor has a lot of eye care stuff. If you're unfamiliar with PWM, it is a thing and it can affect your eyes and usage. You may find yourself being nauseous, your eyes feeling irritated, you may get headaches. Honor's panels are the best in the sense that you're not going to feel that and your eyes are going to be, you know, feeling great. So I wish more phones had this. Then going down to some of the other stuff. Some of this stuff, it is kind of, you know, what you see similar to another phone. So that's why I'm kind of just going over it really quickly here. You know, things you're going to see in the battery are kind of the same across like Oppo, Vivo, OnePlus. So no need there. Honor Wallet, I mean, again, you saw you need to register. You're probably not going to want to use this because, again, you're not going to be able to. And then if we go to users, it is kind of cool that you can see they haven't disabled the feature where you can use multiple accounts if you care about that. The phone is receiving updates. As you see, there's one there. I like the way they give you the log and show you some, you know, just previews there. So that is neat. So your phone will be updated here. Let's go to navigation. So, you know, straightforward navigation. You could device clone the phone. What else? Let's go into accessibility features. Let's go to some of the shortcuts. So some of your shortcuts there, not a lot of shortcuts compared to like the O gestures in OnePlus or the Moto gestures, but you know, pretty standard stuff there. Other things, well, that are features, but not really. A lot of bloatware. So you see a lot of stuff when you Chinese apps. So you can delete it, but it's just kind of annoying there that you got to do that. And so, yeah, it seems like a lot of features, but not quite a lot that you're going to be able to use. And we go to the camera. The camera experience looks quite similar across all the other Chinese brands, you know, typical stuff like night mode, portrait, etc. On the photo mode, your two most common filters that are going to be going to are the default and the natural. I prefer the natural as it gives you the more true to life, but the default gives you more like a vibrant look. Now these are very interesting filters here. I guess this is what they're trying to pitch you. The magic color, I think it looked horrible just there. You saw just a lot of purple. Not sure why you want to use that, but yeah. Let's go back to, that. And then when you go to video and the pro modes, you know, you can do that sort of thing. And these are the other modes here. Now, as far as the camera goes, from my experience, I wouldn't rank it as the best camera in this kind of a small compact size. If I had to choose, I'd go for the Pixel. And then if I had to choose after that, I'd honestly, even though I'm an Android lover, would go for an iPhone. The camera here is really heavy on the AI enhancement. It smooths out in a way where I don't like it. You can disable stuff like that. By default, these phones like to enhance a lot of like skin smoothing. So you see there's like a lot of so there's a lot of beauty stuff going on there. So I do not like that. So go ahead and disable that. But anyways, the camera is pretty not that great. So it's okay in daylight, but again, skin smoothing from that enhancement is pretty heavy. And then when it gets to night, it does even worse, and it just kind of overkills. But enough talking. I have some samples, a few of them, so you can see. And once we get over that, come back and review and wrap up. (1080) 30 frames per second, lowering the quality, just seeing what that looks like now compared to the 4K. This is now 1080 and doesn't look too bad right now, but in post I noticed that it looks really jittery in the 1080 and 4K. But again, these are harsh conditions that I'm putting the camera to the test. So now let's bring in that flash, and this is 4K 60 frames per second. It's about 8 p.m. So it's about 8 o'clock, 4K 60 frames per second, 4K 60 frames per second. Obviously you can't even see me. That's because the flash is off, but this is what the front selfie looks like. So here we are now, 1080 60 frames per second with the Honor. And just as I'm going and changing it, there is a shift in the color. I'm not sure if you see that, but obviously light is, changing as I'm moving the phone. So it's not doing too great about, picking up color changes. Even the initial change from 4K to 1080, the walls changed a little bit with a little bit more yellow, but I mean, still pretty good. And I mean, this is an Air phone, so not too bad. Here's a look at 1080 60 frames per second with the Honor. I think it's doing a pretty good job. I mean, I've used other phones. If you look in the channel, it's not changing drastically, like keeps color consistent as I'm moving across. It's not dimming or dimming up or down. Light is consistent, not too bad. Now if we go 4K 60 frames per second, still doing a pretty good job of maintaining that exposure. As you see, as I'm turning, there's no sudden change in lighting. There was a little bit there, but that's from the lamp. The color is, I wouldn't say on point. I mean, it's pretty good. It's not true tone, though these walls are giving, through the camera lens, a bit of like pale, like green or yellow, but they're actually more of like a cream. Yeah. So now that we've seen those samples, should you buy this phone if you're in the United States? And my honest opinion is no. There's just a lot of big risk here. It's not a great camera, in my opinion. There are better camera experiences. Yes, it's cool. The phone is one hand and you get 5,500 milliamps. Really impressive compared to, the battery on this. It's not even 5,000. And the fact that it did it here, I mean, that's silicone technology for you, but it's still not enough, guys. And it's other just funny things to mention. It's really shameful how they're trying to just rip off Apple. It doesn't quite look like the iPhone Air, but they've also got this in the orange, that 17 Pro Max color. But Honor's really trying to be like, hey, we got you guys, we're the better version than Apple. So, but I mean, overall, it's an interesting phone, but not one that I would buy. Yeah, I just think it's lacking in a lot. So now, if you watched through all that, I do no longer have the phone. So if you have specific questions about it, sorry, phone sold off. What you see here is what you get. So can't really answer any specific questions other than the ones I've shared here in the video. So other than that, hope you enjoyed, and like, comment, subscribe, and until next time.